When Donald Trump mockingly made his comment that India and Pakistan have been fighting over Kashmir over the past 1500 years, many Indian papers blasted him for his stupidity.
They've had that fight for 1,000 years in Kashmir.
But behind Trump's politically incorrect mumbo-jumbo lay a sad reality. The reality of India and Pakistan and the 1,700 million mostly poor people of South Asia. Their fate reminds us of the curse of Sisyphus, who was condemned by gods to roll an immense boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time it neared the top. Peace has continuously cheated the two nations, separated at birth like Siamese twins. And now, once again, they stare into the abyss of another war. It needs no special brains to know that the mastermind behind the massacre of 26 innocent tourists in Pehal'gam on the 22nd of April 2025 wanted to set a stage for war between India and Pakistan. Yet the fact that the two nuclear neighbours are locked in a dangerous standoff just because a criminal mind so wanted defies logic and defeats hope.
I say to the whole world, India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backer. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth.
Will there be a war? What kind of war? Will it settle anything? Or like the miserable Sisyphus Indians and Pakistanis, two people of immense potential, continue to fight for another 1,000 years to justify Trump's sick humour? Professor Christine Fair of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University and Dr. Hussein Nadeem from George Washington University have joined Dr. Moeed Pirzada to ponder on questions to which there are no easy answers.
So if Indians are unable to respond the way the Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants, and they're hurt, they feel betrayed, they think they have been, stabbed, in the Pehal'gam terrorism, that means it's going to breed a lot of frustration. So how is the Indian frustration going to demonstrate itself? How is it going to come out?
Limited war is possible. The problem, of course, is that a limited conflict is not going to be this devastating defeat to the Pakistanis, but it's going to make it change its behavior. I mean, the Pakistan army requires an Indian enemy. So we're no Indian enemy. The Pakistan army wouldn't be able to sell the story that they're the great defender, that they're the great Bajar.
So Indians are stuck. I mean, Narendra Modi has made the position in his Bihar rally that I'm going to, chase these terrorists till the end of the world, and we will identify them, we'll track them, we'll punish them. But nothing is really working for the Indians at the moment. So it is the Indians who appear to be stuck. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
What happened in Kargil as well was that, the military went on with its own adventure. That was single-handedly the worst diplomatic defeat that Pakistan has ever faced. So for India right now, if I'm the decision maker, I have to ask myself a question. When does it stop? And if this is the right time for me to go and use all my ammunition, all my options.
The Pakistan army can't exist as it exists today if there's peace with India. It just can't. So no army chief is going to pursue the enduring, solid peace with India.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Moeed Pirzada. Joining me are two distinguished guests and experts on the subject. Joining me is Dr. Christine Fair. Professor Christine Fair is a professor of security studies at Georgetown University. She has previously been a senior political scientist with Iran Corporation. She has also been affiliated with the United States Institute of Peace. She has written a number of books. Her latest book is about Lashkar-e-Taiba in their own words. She also wrote a very interesting book, Pakistan Army's Way of War, Fighting Till the End. She has written extensively for Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, New York Times, Al Jazeera. She has also made television appearances in CBS, CNN, Al Jazeera, and many other places. Joining me also is Dr. Hussein Nadeem. He is a professional lecturer at the George Washington University. He teaches artificial intelligence and national security. Previously, he has been an executive director at the Islamabad Policy Research Institute. He has also been a director of South Asia Study Program group at the Sydney University in Australia. He has been affiliated with United States Institute of Peace, USIP, and Woodrow Wilson. And he has written extensively on the nexus of national security, artificial intelligence, and Pakistan's security consideration, jihadi culture, and so on. So I can start straight away with you, Professor Christine Fair. We see a dangerous brinksmanship between the political elites of India and Pakistan after a brutal terrorist attack in Pehal'gam in the Indian-controlled Kashmir. How serious is that situation?
So if we compare it to 2019, when Jaish-e-Mohammed attacked a CRPF convoy, killing about 40 Jawans, this is far less serious than that. What Modi had during the Pulwama crisis was a looming national election, and it was a tight election. He was able to use the militarized response really to catapult him to victory in the 2019 election. So what do we have here? So we have a pretty terrible terrorist attack in Pahal'gam. About 25 people, civilians, Indian tourists were killed. There's no looming elections at either the state level or the national level. So Modi doesn't have a lot of cachet that he is interested in expending at this point. But the ball is in India's court. So if we look at the lessons learned of Pulwama, when India conducted airstrikes and Pakistan responded in response to those airstrikes, we know that the Indians scrambled. The Indians lost an F-16 a MiG in Pakistani territory, and then it falsely claimed that it had shot down an F-16. And I had argued that this myth of the shooting down of the F-16 is what provided India the off-ramp to de-escalation. There's no other way forward to de-escalate had the ISI not very fortuitously made the comment about the Dusra Banda. And then the Indians ran with the Dusra Banda. And then there were a number of people like Samir Joshi who went into evidence manufacturing mode to support the claim of the Indian F-16 shootout or shoot down. So I do anticipate that India is going to have to undertake some measured response. But I also hope that India had learned the lessons of Pulwama, that had the Dusra Banda Pani not been available, it's not clear what the de-escalation off-ramp would have been. But I do anticipate some sort of limited strike in response to this, but I don't expect it to be on the scale that we saw on Pulwama, largely because of the fact that I would like to believe that India has learned some lessons about its capabilities.
Dr. Fair, the Dusra Banda was actually confusion in the fog of war.
Yes, of course it was.
Yeah, it was a confusion, actually. I think subsequently the Pakistani side was able to clarify. But moving forward from what you have said, Dr. Hussain, do you agree that Indians do not have such a strong incentive to go ahead in a warlike situation?
I agree with Dr. Fair on this thing, that the intensity of the situation isn't just the same. There was an election momentum, the whole frenzy was there, and Modi really needed it back then. Right now, if you look at the narrative coming out of them, the press releases, and just globally as well, it's a very lukewarm response. And this is something that the Indian regime and the BJP IT cells are complaining about, that, the Trump administration isn't coming out too strong. The international community isn't just covering it in the same way. So there is that mildness in intensity, definitely. So I'll try to phrase it in this way, that, it is similar in many ways from 2019 and in 2008 Mumbai attack, but it's also different in many other ways. It's similar in many ways because the script is over and over the same, the same tactics, the same institutional strategy, the same poking India in the eye whenever, you want to embarrass India or humiliate India, especially at a time of, vice president's visit and etc. So you really expose India in a sense. And that is something, Pakistan is very good at. It is very capable of doing that. But it's different in a way because, and I think I want to also get Dr. Christine Fair's opinion on this, is that, Modi is playing his now, late innings now, right, in the cricketing sense. And he doesn't have any election to worry about. He doesn't really have any popularity to worry about. So do you reckon that maybe now is a time where he can, maybe go into that proper, thought out, well-to-do, once and for all action? So this is something that I'm
once and for
thinking that
all
maybe
action.
This could,
if I correctly heard you, that he can go on for once and for all action.
So an action that could solve this problem from their side, whatever they think, because there is a window of opportunity now. No elections, no politics, nothing, and he's like in his late innings now, so they can really act.
And what is it supposed to mean by once and for all action? What are you hinting at?
They can scaling it up. They can scale it up really, really high. Make it really intense, scale up the consequences, punish Pakistan in a very brutal way. So I want to actually have Dr. Christian Faye's opinion on this. Do you think that this is a room of
Professor
window
Fair.
of opportunity? Yeah, Professor Faye's opinion.
So I actually have a pretty dim view on that outcome. And the reason is everyone talks about India's massive military superiority, but if you actually look at the international border and the line of control, both of the forces are actually pretty evenly aligned. So India cannot immediately devastatingly punish Pakistan in a way that is going to be earth-shattering. That's just not possible. Militarily, India doesn't have that capability. India has the capability to move its forces and amass them on its western border with Pakistan, but that's going to take a really, really long time. India has a heavy footprint. Its military forces don't. It's not an expeditionary force like the Americans have, and of course, all international eyes are going to be able to see India making that mobilization. So no, I don't. And India can't just deliver decisively a military defeat upon Pakistan at a risk that it can actually tolerate. I mean,
Very
yeah,
interesting. Dr. Fair, more than 50 years ago, when India was far less advanced in 1965, when the Pakistani side barged into Kashmir in Operation Gibraltar and so on, the Indians were able to bring their whole armored thrust within less than 1 month on Pakistani front in Lahore and Sialkot. Why do you think that in the year 2025, the Indians cannot bring a huge force in Azad Kashmir or in Punjab within, say, 3 to 4 weeks?
well, that's the conventional understanding of people who are quite knowledgeable of the Indian military. So it's not my own assessment, it's the assessment of several people who know the Indian military quite well. And of course, ultimately, what we learned from Cargill, right, is that any conflict has to remain limited. Cargill demonstrated that, but Cargill also demonstrated that limited war is possible. Problem, of course, is that a limited conflict is not going to be this devastating defeat to the Pakistanis, but it's going to make it change its behavior. I mean, the Pakistan army requires an Indian enemy. So we're no Indian enemy. The Pakistan army wouldn't be able to sell the story that they're the great defender, that they're the great Bahadur. They wouldn't be able to justify the enormity of their conventional forces, their budgetary hold, their massive consumption of resources. So without this massive enemy, the Pakistan army can't exist as it does. So I always think of the Pakistan army as an insurgent. It can't defeat India. It has no means of defeating India. But if you're an insurgent, how do you show that you haven't been defeated? By episodically engaging in these kinds of actions to prove that India hasn't defeated Pakistan. So I don't think it's possible for India to deliver this decisive defeat without running massive risks towards nuclear escalation. And that's the general consensus of people who study Indian and Pakistani nuclear security.
Very interesting. But let me come back to the principal question, the fundamental question. Why do you think the terrorism in Pehal'gam happened? I mean, it's just an accident, a homegrown terrorism? I mean, why it has happened?
I mean, like I said, Pakistan is an insurgent. If it doesn't execute these kinds of attacks with some regularity, it looks as if they've been cowed or they've been coerced or they've been compelled or deterred by India. And how Pakistan proves that it hasn't been compelled or coerced or deterred by India is by episodically conducting these attacks. It's consistent with my thesis that Pakistan's military and the ISI that it controls is an insurgent organization.
Hussein, you were in Pakistan. You were working with Islamabad Policy Research Institute, IPRI, between 2019 and 2022, I guess. At least you were there in 2021 and 22. You know, General Bajwa, the previous army chief, wanted to have good relationship with India. I mean, he unilaterally negotiated, personally negotiated the the 2021 ceasefire renewal. And I have been privy to discussions with the Indian diplomats and even Indians military attaches in Islamabad. They were actually full of praise for General Bajwa. They thought that General Bajwa had a lot of vision. He's a man of peace. He's actually making it possible. They, in fact, thought that Imran Khan was the obstruction. So, do you think there was a certain Bajwa doctrine that General Asim Munir has now broken?
I think there is a general tendency within the military chiefs of Pakistan. I mean, they have, for the purpose of presentation to the global audience, they do want to, just make this peace dialogue with India and, normalization with India as one of their diplomatic point of view. And that's partly stems out of their oversized role in diplomacy in Pakistan, which they're not supposed to be in. So when they step into that diplomatic role and they have to engage diplomats and engage international community, this is one of the talking points that almost every military chief that I have come across in the last 2 or 3 decades, at least, they have had this as a talking point. Now, there is a military chief, like for instance, General Bajwa you mentioned. He was I'm finding hard to use the exact word, but he was a man who would say anything. He was known to say anything, and he was somebody who was a very a big guy with tall words. So I think there was policy that General Bajwa had, which he was overstating at times, and then there was other policy of the institution. Now, the policy of the institution was very, very deeply ingrained, and it doesn't just reflect the policy of the army chief. And in many cases, the institutional momentum and inertia can defy what the army chiefs want in many cases. So I don't think I would take General Bajwa's rapprochement with India as the institutional policy or the change of behavior in the institution. It didn't reflect that at all.
Dr. Fair, what do you think? I mean, General Bajwa's doctrine now versus what's happening now.
So, I mean, I agree. I mean, every army chief has these talking points, and they view, interactions with you and other people as opportunities to sort of shape the information domain. So I don't take those claims at face value. I don't take them at face value at all, because the simple fact is, whether we look at Pakistan, the strategic culture of the Pakistan army, or whether we look at a more materialistic approach of the Pakistan army can't exist as it exists today if there's peace with India. It just can't. So no army chief is going to pursue a enduring, solid peace with India. It isn't going to happen.
But Professor Fair, you have been the author of at least 2 very interesting books, Pakistan Army's Way of War, Fighting to the End, and also about Lashkar-e-Taiba in their own words, which is about Lashkar-e-Taiba's literature. So, but the ceasefire which General Bajwa negotiated in 2021 held on despite the fact that General Asim Munir took over in November 2022. It held on for so long, and Indians were also not creating any problem for this regime in Pakistan. What went wrong?
So, like I said, the Pakistan Army is an insurgent organization. It has to perpetrate violence. I'm also going to say that despite that ceasefire, terrorism went unabated in Kashmir. It didn't disappear just because there's a ceasefire. So that's kind of a misnomer. There might be a ceasefire in conventional forces, but there's not a ceasefire in terms of the subconventional assets that the Pakistan Army deploys. I mean, violence has been ongoing throughout that period in Kashmir. What makes this particular event so different was just the scale, right? So it more people died in this attack than the sum total of all people who died in terrorist attacks up to this point in the year. But that does mean that between now and that attack, about 25 people died in terrorist attacks in Kashmir. So the ceasefire is also very performative. It doesn't mean that there's a ceasefire with regards to sending subconventional assets like Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish or its various front organizations to the valley to conduct terrorism.
But you're aware that the Indians have pointed that this is in fact an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, which they call as Resistance Front.
The Resistance Front, yes.
Yeah, just one day ago, Initially, the Resistance Front had claimed it on its website. In the last 24 hours, Pakistani television channels are reporting that Resistance Front has now issued another press release on its website, said their website was hacked by some sort of hackers, and now they said that they have nothing to do with it. And
Yeah,
the Pakistani side is claiming that this is all a homegrown Kashmiri resistance. How do you look at that?
So, look, I mean, Pakistan is going to want to depict this as a homegrown resistance. No, I don't believe that the Resistance Front website was hacked. I don't believe that for a femtosecond. I believe that the Resistance Front did it. I don't believe a terrorist attack of this nature, of this scale, and this size doesn't happen without the imprimatur of Pindi. So Pakistan has an enormous incentive to depict the violence in Kashmir as homegrown. In the same way that India has an enormous incentive to depict every stone thrower as a Pakistani proxy. But these sorts of events are not homegrown. The kinds of events that are homegrown are the kinds of events that kill one or two people. This is not a homegrown event.
Dr. Hussain, if I have correctly understood, Professor Fair, um, whatever has happened, the Pakistani side has gained the advantage. They have created the tension, the warlike situation. They have a reason to claim the popularity of the defender of the Pakistan army. Indians are stuck. Indians are stuck without any kind of proper response to it. How do you look at it?
I think in this situation where we are right now, both sides have very few options. So there is every time there is an escalation, the option matrix goes down. But I would also like to say one thing, and this is something I wrote in my last book as well, that the way, and I took a lot of inspiration from Dr. Fair's work on fighting till the end, which was really that the way Pakistan army fights is from the position of weakness. So they can exert a lot of agency and a lot of power from us being a smaller player in the game, like they did with the US, like they did back with the times of the Soviet Union. And this is something that they take a big pride in. And Dr. Faith said something last night as well, which I really really liked, which was the fact that their calculus, which and she articulated it very well. And I think that she understands the institution so well that that she's able to articulate in the most clear sense, which was one thing which she mentioned was uh, they're not there to win. They're just not there to lose comprehensively, right? So if their calculus is, and a lot of people, when you talk to the Indians and you look at the journal analysts, they're thinking about winning and losing. But here is a side that doesn't want to really win. They just don't want to comprehensively lose, because every time they're able to poke India in the eye is a victory for them, even if they have to take a beating after that. So Kargil, I mean, apparently was a defeat for Pakistan. But what did really happen? Musharraf came back in power, had a great deal with the US in war on terror, and there you go. Pakistan is growing 6 to 8% GDP per growth, right?
But Dr. Hussain, you said that both sides don't really, including the Pakistan side, don't really have very good options. But if, as we have so far discussed, if this event in Pehal'gam, this tragic event, this brutal terrorism has been masterminded by Pindi, by Pakistani side, then they wanted to create tension, a warlike situation. They wanted to India-Pakistan tension to gain politically from it. They have gained politically from it. Why do you say they have less options? I mean, they have exercised their option. India is stuck. It has declared a suspension of Indus Water Treaty. That doesn't mean anything on the ground, because in this season, for the next 7 months, the water stoppage cannot really effectively take place. They're not even saying that we are stopping the water flows. They're actually saying that it is basically to terminate the various kind of meetings, the inspection and the protocols, the exchange of data and the information. So Indians are stuck. I mean, Narendra Modi has made the position in his Bihar rally that I'm going to, chase these terrorists till the end of the world, and we will identify them, we'll track them, we'll punish them. But nothing is really working for the Indians at the moment. So it is the Indians who appear to be stuck. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, both sides have lesser of the options. India has.
How are
I think
both
sides.
Pakistani side has actually taken advantage.
So the Indian side is very clearly stuck, right? So that's one is given. Now the Pakistani side has an advantage, a short-term advantage, I would say, a medium-term advantage. But how does that really? And let me rephrase a little bit. When we talk about Pakistan and the actors in the game, there is Pakistan and then there is Pakistan Army. These are two different actors who have very different interests and strategic interests as well, right? So Pakistan might want to have strategic relations with India, opening up trade and all. The Pakistan army is not really thinking about opening up trade with India or building those ecosystems of connectivity. So there could be a very good chance that the Pakistan army wins out of this, but it is a net loss for the Pakistan as a whole, because what happened in Kargil as well was that the military went on with its own adventure. That was single-handedly the worst diplomatic defeat that Pakistan has ever faced. Sure, there was a certain victory there, but the overall net loss for the country is still recovering from. And this is what I'm trying to say, that every time that Pakistan goes for an adventure, it is not without a hit on its own. So while Pakistan did it, sure, it gave a bloody nose to India. Sure, it got a very advantage right now. But what will that advantage turn into? And that is where it's very important. If you win a battle, but the war you're losing anyway because of the economy problem, the India will have 100 different ways to muscle you out now. The pressure in the Washington DC will build up. So you're really cornering yourself every time you do something
I'll
like
come
this.
back
And
to
I
the
don't think this
pressure
is
in the Washington
sustainable.
DC. I'll come back to the pressure in the Washington DC. Professor Fair, when we last met, you expressed a lot of disappointment from the mobilization capacity of the Indian Army, the kind of equipment they're using, their internal communication, antiquated methodology, and the warfighting sort of capacity, in the sense that they're not being properly modernized. But interestingly, at the same time, today I saw an article, a news analysis published by New York Times, which basically cites several Indian sources. And they argue that India wanted to modernize their military, especially after 2018 parliamentary report, the defense parliamentary report, which basically told them that 68% of the Indian equipment is vintage, 22% is current, and only 8% is state of the art. But because of the Ukraine war, because of the funding problems, because of conflict with China, their funds were actually gone there because of the Galwan. They have not been able to modernize. So what Narendra Modi wanted to do with Pakistan is simply not possible in the present condition of the Indian military. How do you look at that, the New York Times story?
I didn't see the New York Times. I actually boycott the New York Times because I'm not a fan of their coverage of Gaza. In fact, I find it really offensive and appalling. And so, in the interest of Palestinian solidarity, I don't subscribe to the New York Times. But the article, of course, it says everything that's well known. India has a fundamental problem with defense modernization, and I actually think the best book on this is Anit Mukherjee. His book is called The Absent Dialogue. And it really talks about why it is that India is just not able to engage in proper defense modernization. I mean, I'll just give you an example. India's strategic culture is that it doesn't want to be reliant upon any sole supplier. So whereas most developed countries have maybe 3 MMRCAs, India has had at 1.9 MMRCAs, which is a medium range multi-role combat aircrafts. The problem is that everything about those different MMRCAs, they have different logistical tails, they have different pilots, they're not interchangeable. India has an enormous tooth to tail ratio because of the logistics. And it's not just MMRCAs, it comes, artillery. You name a weapon system. And India has this massive proliferation of weapon systems that's inefficient and not interchangeable and just eats up a lot of resources. India is also not capable of modernization in the sense that, certainly from an American defense modernization point of view, because it's a large standing military. Any kind of downsizing to focus upon technology as opposed to real numbers is going to be a political non-starter. And in any event, it's going to be really difficult to do when India has so many standing border disputes. So the challenges that India confronts with defense modernization is, in fact, I really encourage you to bring Anat Mukherjee on to talk about his book,
I will try.
Absent
But how do you
Dialogue.
compare this paralysis with Pakistan? Are Pakistanis better in modernizing the military?
So I think the Pakistanis care more about flying the plane than they care about flying the flag, right? So India's domestic defense production is really shambolic. DRDO is, I mean, that's what happens when you don't have any private sector competition. You have a lethargic organization that can't respond. It produces weapon systems that are decades late, decades obsolete, deeply problematic from operational points of view. Pakistan is more interested in just having weapons that are functional. So Pakistan's not that concerned about indigenous production. So Pakistan will import the best equipment that it can get. I can't say that the Pakistanis are any better on the logistical front than the Indians. They don't have they're not interested in Pakistan's not worried about being singularly dependent upon a one point supplier, right? So Pakistan's able to have the efficiencies in those weapon systems by not having redundant systems that are from different suppliers and so forth. So I don't feel like I have the expertise to make the comparison across the board logistics wise, but what I do feel comfortable saying is that this massive country that India represents is not able to convert those massive resources into national power for the reasons that I've discussed.
So is this because of inefficiency, incompetence, bureaucratic red tapeism, inability to decide effectively, because of the
All of the
democracy?
above. All of the above. I mean, look at India's defense minister. When has there ever been a defense minister that has known anything about defense?
But what about Pakistan? And Pakistan's defense minister doesn't know anything about defense
Well,
either.
it doesn't matter because the Pakistan
Yeah,
army
man,
runs the
yeah,
show.
yeah.
The defense minister, he's like a sideshow.
It's like, so I mean, this is my
Fair
question
point.
to both Dr. Hussain and Dr. Fair. So if Indians are unable to respond the way the Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants, and they're hurt, they feel betrayed, they think they have been, stabbed, in the Pahalgam terrorism, they mean this is going to breed a lot of frustration. So how is the Indian frustration going to demonstrate itself? How is it going to come out? Dr. Fair?
Well, I anticipate the Indians are going to do something. I don't think they're not going to do nothing. I think there's going to be some sort of standoff weapons being shot. There was a lot of controversy about whether or not India actually did enter Pakistani airspace after Pulwama. It's not really clear. The Indians said they did, but independent analysts suggested that it looks as if those spice weapons were actually shot from from Kashmir,
Yeah.
not into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa airspace.
You
So
mean
I
like
suspect that
they were shot from the Pakistani controlled Azad Kashmir?
Yes, I'm aware of your audience, and so how one describes Kashmir is just complicated. The Pakistani controlled Kashmir. I'm not going to call it Azad Kashmir. There's nothing Azad about it, but they didn't. Uh, it didn't cross into KPK airspace, according to many analysts, like the Indians claimed. So I suspect that we're going to see something. Then it's going to be up to the Pakistanis to decide how they're going to respond. But I think there'll be something. I think something is going to happen. I don't think the Indians are going to just let this go without some kind of response.
So, Dr. Hussain, if Indians do some strikes, then Pakistanis will be bound to do similar nature of strikes. So, what will India gain out of the strikes? One plus one minus one?
So, here is how I've tried to game it out. The strikes part they tried in, as Dr. Fair already said, they tried it out in 2019, right? Didn't really work out for them. But they had like a domestic political win, and that was it. So now, in the absence of a domestic political consideration for that, what would the option matrix or the decision matrix would look like? So if I was to be in the shoes of, let's say, Modi, one thing I think I would be really thinking of is that that and this is what the Indian media and communication is putting out right now, that every time that India is trying to grow, is trying to exert its influence globally, and it is showing that it is like a major global power, Pakistan comes in, sparks something in Kashmir, and all of a sudden the world is like, oh, India has a lot of holes in it, and it is not maybe as we thought a reliable power or a reliable partner would be. So that demonstration by Pakistan is something that these guys are now really getting are feeling the pain about. So the question to me really is, and this is where these guys also come in, who the Indian intelligence networks, and they're saying is that this can't continue to go on. We cannot continue to do this. Every 5 years we try to look, because just before this whole Kashmir episode happened in J&K, they were presenting J&K as, the reopening of tourism and the whole stability and all, and it just cracked it open. So for India right now, if I'm the decision maker, I have to ask myself a question. When does it stop? And if this is the right time for me to go and use all my ammunition, all my options. And then I would think about it. Okay, what are the metrics I can see in Pakistan? Pakistan has an illegitimate government, didn't win democratically. There is an army chief who's very unpopular. The military morale is very much low. The economy is almost teetering on collapse. There is an economic political collapse, and the public is very much fed up. So these are all the metrics I'm going to look at. And then I'm going to think about it that, okay, is this a right now time for me to use all the options on the table? Option number one, can I increase the covert operations in Pakistan, make them pay, make them feel pain? Can I increase that? Number two, can I sabotage their economic interests, in their political interests? Can I, so there is not just one, going for the strikes. That could be one to, win back some credibility. But India does have some leverages on Pakistan. And then there is a bigger thing that we haven't really discussed here, where I want to bring it in, is that for a very long time we have continued to think about Pakistan as a sort of a proxy between China and the US, and both trying to exert their influence. But if you really look at the decades of history, the US and China has never really played the proxies in Pakistan. If anyone, it has been the US and India. For India, they have been saying to the Americans for decades, 65 wars, 71 wars. Since then, they've really been telling the Americans that, this is because of you, this country is has become an irritant to us. And even right now, with President Trump's statement, Indians are not really happy because they're seeing it a pattern repeated again, that America is now protecting Pakistan army for all it's doing. So I think there is an American element to it, which I think will be something that Indians will weigh a lot in, because they just don't want to do something which ends up having them to go back and be able to
So
get
what to
more
make of the
embarrassed.
President Trump's very sort of comments that India and Pakistan, I know them very well. I mean, these have been fighting for the past 1500 years.
1500 years.
And so basically he's saying that Hindus and Muslims, this is a civilizational fight. So does it really mean that he's basically saying that, America has nothing to do with it anymore? Is this what he's saying?
I would like Dr. Fair comment on it
Well,
first.
I mean, what he Trump's means by, I mean, first of all, he came up when the Pehal'gam thing happened. He comes up with a very strong statement that we're strongly with with standing with India. And now this statement in the last 24 hours in Air Force One, in which he says, well, I know them, they are like fighting with each other for 1500 years on Kashmir. So he totally dismisses them as babies, as irresponsible tantrums and all that. What is it? What do we mean out of it?
First of all, he's not smart enough to think of this as a civilizational war. I mean, I don't think he's familiar with the history of the subcontinent that would. So we're ascribing a certain level of cognitive competence to that comment. It's really just his ignorance speaking. But actually, if you go back to Obama's period, under Obama, there was a huge shift, right? When Mumbai happened, the United States did not go screaming at Pakistan. The United States screamed at India, you're the responsible partner here. Engage in restraint. Don't escalate. We'll get Pakistan to say some nice things.
Right.
Under Obama,
Why was
changed.
that? Why was that?
Well, I mean, traditionally, Pakistan could rely upon the United States to force the Indians into restraint. And that was part of their strategy. It's a sort of scapegoat responsibility for their actions, because the Americans would rely upon the Indians to not escalate. And probably the Indians were cooperative in that because they didn't have a lot of escalatory options anyway. Well, going back to Obama, US rhetoric began to change. The US stopped saying, we encourage the Indians to exert restraint. So actually what Trump is intimating, it has been fairly continuous with US policy, which is the Americans are not going to be part of this function of providing Pakistani cover. There's this idea that Pakistan has to bear consequences for its actions, and it's up to India, not the United States, to make those consequences happen. So Trump is, of course, we know he is not possessing a lot of executive function, but what he accidentally stumbled upon has been a fairly continuous US policy going back to Obama.
But Dr. Hussain, at the same time, just hold on. we have also been hearing, I and you have been hearing, of Indian robust diplomacy and engagement with the United States, with the UK, with the Saudis, with the Chinese on the issue of the Pahalgam. So once you listen to Trump's latest comments and what Professor Fair says, the United States appears disinterested. I mean, what do you make of it?
So there are two things over here. One, I agree with Dr. Fair. She's rightly articulated that, but I'll try to build on top of it. So with President Trump right now, the way I would read it is that he has multiple crises his plate right now. So he's Gaza, he's in the Israeli front and on the Ukraine front. He's busy with that. But the way I would read it is that he's trying to not give too much significance to this one so that it doesn't boil over and it is part of the national discourse, because what president really says becomes an issue, right? So he's trying to scrub it off as this is a non-issue, this has been going on. So if you look at his personality, he tries to do that for the issues that he doesn't want to touch. Now that is President Trump. But there is a huge institutional, the State Departments, the Pentagon, and all of that, which have very direct interest, and on a day-to-day basis, they're engaging with the Indians. Now, they've been giving out statements, and they've come out very strongly on statements that we will support the Indians and all. Now, while the executive might not be, fully into it, or being trying to take one side or the other side, if the U.S. institution and the U.S. establishment is able to do some signaling that we will be fine if India is able to take it notch level 3 or notch level 4. And I think those decisions are going to be happening on that part. The onus is really going to be on the Indian side. So Indian diplomats are right now very active in Riyadh, UK, and elsewhere. There is, from what I understand, there is no signaling to them, signaling to the Indians yet that you need to calm down, do not respond. So that hasn't been there this time. The response is going to be there. The only thing is that what level of scale they will be able to tolerate. So I think this is something that the Indians and Indians do have, some leverage on that, because with the UK, with the US, especially with JD Vance visiting India, he was trying to woo them to be on the side of the US instead of China. So India could, if they really want to play it, they could play that card. Now my concern is when I talk to my friends on the Indian side, in the Indian government and all, they're in a catch-22 position. They don't want to get embroiled with Pakistan. This is not where they want to go, because they believe that they have a great opportunity during these Trump 4 years to grow robustly. I mean, they have the taps open, the US-China competition is there, the Apple whole manufacturing is moving to India, so they don't really want to jeopardize that. So by getting themselves entangled into with Pakistan, they risk doing that. But if they don't do anything at all, 3 years when India is in a better position and Pakistan does the same thing, the cost and the pain will be even more. So right now, if I'm Prime Minister Modi, my thinking is, should I stop it right now when I'm early in the stages? Or should I build up really big empire 3 years later and then get hit and then be toasted again? So India will respond, but the way it's going to respond is not going to be traditional. They have to be really either go Napoleon on it, or they have to I completely give it up, which I don't think.
Fair, I understand. Dr. Fair, I understand that you have to leave as well. I mean, we're running short of the time. Just wanted to set some questions. Can we then make a conclusion that Indians, despite all the limitations, if you listen to Hussain, despite all the limitations and capacity issues which you cite, which has also been cited by New York Times, Indians also have a very strong compulsion to act. I was talking to a senior Indian source person in New Delhi, and I asked him the question that will there be something more than the Indus Water Treaty? He says definitely, because the Prime Minister's mood, so there has to be a military response. What would be the nature of that military response, if you guess? Will it take place in Azad Kashmir? Will it take place in Punjab? Will it be the airstrikes? Will it be mobilization? I mean, what Hussain says that they have come to a point where they think that, this is the opportunity. There is an unpopular regime, extremely unpopular, a weak country. So we need to settle. So what would be their response in your assessment?
The lowest cost for them is something in Azad Kashmir, or even something in a remote part of KPK if they can find a Lashkar camp or something. I think the Punjab for the most part, it's going to be way too dangerous. I mean, most of the Punjab is a pretty densely populated state that would, and quite frankly, that would just be a bridge too far for the Pakistan army. I mean, is we've been able to watch the Pakistan army throughout the duration of the GWAT. They're perfectly happy throwing Pashtuns to the wolves. They're not willing to they're not willing to sacrifice Punjabis. So I don't see an attack in the Punjab as look, you can I'm you can never be too sure. I mean, I'm just making my best reasoned guess is that an attack in the Punjab is probably a bridge too far, but something in Azad Kashmir or KPK is something that the Pakistan army would tolerate.
Just airstrikes
Um,
to mobilization.
I don't think a mobilization is going to be on the cards here. I think that's just too provocative. I mean, that's just not something that's going to happen. I think airstrikes are the most likely, with some sort of standoff weaponry.
Hussein, last. So when you build up, when you argue that they will have to do something decisive, I mean, airstrikes cannot be something very decisive.
No.
So what is that
Yeah.
decisive thing that you fear that they will be thinking that we have to act decisively now or never?
I think the decisive part also comes it comes also from within, right? What are your now intentions for after Mumbai attacks? There was a decision made within the Indian establishment that we're going to make them pay, and they did make Pakistan pay in Balochistan, in KP, and elsewhere. You know, they did inflict a lot of injury on Pakistan to a point where Pakistan army has very serious problems of credibility and approval rate within Pakistan. So it's not by an accident that happened. And actually, you know, Pakistan Army made tons of its own mistakes as well. Now, the Indians have a whole range of options for them on how they can inflict injury. Now, that could be done through, you know, through scaling up the violence, scaling up the intensity of, you know, insurgencies in Pakistan and other matters. So the action isn't necessarily related to, you know, you come in, you throw a few bombs and then you go and exit. The economic warfare, the diplomatic warfare, the all sorts of suites they can really use. I mean, you know, a couple of things that they can do is, you know, get the business community globally to basically, you know, make sure that the Pakistani talent isn't really hired in the companies where you know and that signaling itself. It doesn't really have to be generated by the Indian government. It's just a soft power, right? So, for instance, I work in Silicon Valley. I have a tech company over there. The Indians practically run the tech industry in the Silicon Valley. Now, having done the right kind of messaging can really create problems for, you know, the talent from Pakistan. There are billions of dollars of worth company that can take a, you know, a decision on this, and you know, we won't be taking up talent, like, you know, the cinemas and the movies stop taking, you know, the actors and actresses and musicians from Pakistan. They can also they really hurt the 65% of youth bulge in Pakistan by making sure that none of the Indian companies, or they stop doing business with companies that have, you know, talent from Pakistan. They can do economic sanctions like this,
Long-term
which can
strategies.
really get killed.
You're thinking in terms of long-term strategies.
No, these are very short term, by the way. They can inflict pain in very short term as well, with long term
This
consequences.
will be
This
the
can
pain
happen
for
in
the
days.
Pakistani people, not pain for the Pakistani military. This will be pain, common Pakistanis' pain, you know.
Yeah, so you know, it
So,
can work
Dr. Fred,
both
the
ways.
last question to you. The Pakistani military has two supporters in Washington. One is CENTCOM, the other is CIA. If the
Oh, and
Indians,
the State Department. Don't forget the State Department.
also State Department is also there. So I
Oh,
put that
very much
together.
so. Very
So
much
they
so.
have three allies: Department of State, CIA, and CENTCOM inside Pentagon. Now, if the things get hot, can these three allies help bail them out?
No. I don't think that's the interest. I mean, there's allies, but there's also I don't I don't want to overpaint this ally notion. There is a lot of residual anger at the Pakistan army over Afghanistan. Um, when you go to the Pentagon, you don't find a lot of friends of Pakistan. I think that train has sailed, and I mix that metaphor deliberately. CIA needs Pakistan because of the covert interests with regards to the Islamic State and Al Qaeda. So the CIA needs Pakistan. I think the check has been written too many times and it's bounced with regards to the Pentagon. The State Department has a different view on Pakistan. And for those of us who are old enough to remember parking meters, you put a quarter in the parking meter and you're supposed to get 15 minutes, but you get 5. That's kind of how the State Department views Pakistan. If you change policy and you try to adopt a more coercive policy towards Pakistan, maybe you'll put a quarter in and you'll get minus 15 minutes, right? So there's a lot of risk aversity in terms of how the State Department manages Pakistan. But I do remember feeling very frustrated that when Congress was trying to hold Pakistan to account, because Congress is not a friend of Pakistan, just like DOD is not a friend of Pakistan, the State Department spent a lot more time lobbying Congress than it ever did lobbying Pakistan to knock off the policies that were killing our soldiers in Afghanistan. So I think some of these friendships are no longer there. And most of the relationships that do exist are highly transactional. And so, and to that matter, no one is very excited about Pakistan's continued use of terrorism as tools of proxy warfare to irritate the Indians.
You said something which I didn't understand. You said the DOD is not a friend of Pakistan. So you see,
no, it is not
different than CENTCOM in terms of its psychology.
So the days of CENTCOM loving Pakistan are over. Those days are over. It's going to take, you think about all of these young officers that saw their men get killed in Afghanistan, they're going to have to retire before the love comes back for Pakistan. Every single person that has ever served in Afghanistan knows who the real enemy was. Every single military personnel that ever served knows. I've never met an officer or an enlisted, even the most, I would say, unaware enlisted person about the ways of the world knew that the enemy was Pakistan. And so these...
No, I really wanted to end there, but you have sparked another...
Yeah.
You intrigued me into this thing because you have also been, writing on Afghanistan. You have also been resident in Afghanistan.
Yes.
You see, isn't it strange? I mean, you said that the real enemy to the Pentagon, to the CENTCOM, to the American soldiers was Pakistan. Then for 20 long years, if Pakistan had been supporting Afghan Taliban, now for the past 3 years, Pakistan is a loggerheads with the Afghan Taliban. I mean, how do you make sense of it?
So I don't have to make sense of it. I'm just telling you what our soldiers and what our officers believe about Pakistan. And so this friendship, it's going to take a really long time before DOD, including CENTCOM, has trust in Pakistan again, because it just saw the consequences. We saw the intelligence. We saw where Pakistan was arming, aiming, and abetting the Taliban. So Pakistan now, of course, the issue is Taliban, this is really Taliban 3.0 or Taliban 4.0. It resents the Pakistanis because it had been so long treating the Afghan Taliban as a proxy to execute its will in Afghanistan, and it resents it. So now Pakistan has a problem with the Taliban, but the Taliban were perfectly happy taking Pakistani assistance when it needed that assistance to basically defeat the Americans and our NATO and ally partners.
Thank you so much, Professor Christine Fair and Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very provocative discussion. We will continue to discuss the brinksmanship continues in South Asia, and we will continue to discuss that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.